Rich Baker, and we're going over all the chapters of Daniel right now, but we're just into chapter 3. Last we tuned in, we see where Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and Daniel interpreted that dream, and it was a prophecy of all of mankind and all of the kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar didn't seem to appreciate the dream, and we're going to see today how he interprets the kingdoms of the world and how he wanted to be the center of the kingdoms of the world. In this chapter, we'll also see that we are supposed to follow the leadership, the political leaders, the government that is placed over us. From Romans 13, we see that there is no government that is established that God has not established. But we do rebel when what the government tells us to do is against a precept that the Lord has told us to do. So we need to be careful about that. But we're going to see where the young man defied the king's rules, defied his dictates, and we'll see how that comes out with a fiery furnace. All right, let's have our reader read verses 1 and 2, and we'll get started.
King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits and its breadth 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up.
Well, if you recall from chapter 2, the image that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed about, that God gave him, started with a gold head, and then it had a silver chest and arms, and then a bronze waist, and then iron legs, and then finally iron and clay mixed in the feet. And then there was a stone that came in, busted up the feet, and everything came crashing down. Nebuchadnezzar didn't like the end of that. In fact, so much so that, well, as you can see, the image was 90 feet tall, and it was of gold from head to toe. And so Nebuchadnezzar didn't appreciate the thought that the Babylonian Empire would diminish, and didn't like the idea of the Medes and Persians taking over, and so on and so forth. But he had his own ideas, and so he puts up this huge golden image and has everyone ready to worship it. Let's see what happens.
Then the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up.
Well, everybody that was anybody was supposed to be there. Later in the chapter, we'll see that there were more than just the leaders. There were multitudes of people present and supposed to fall on their face before this image. Let's hear verses 4 and 5.
And the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up."
The instructions were relatively clear. When you hear the music of all of these music makers, you're supposed to bow down and worship this thing. And this didn't mean a whole lot to the pagan, evidently. It was a matter of obedience. To the Hebrew children, it was idolatry. And that's a precept they could not step over. Well, imagine the pressure that was on these young men. And yet, we have pressure today, our youth in particular, with media, different things that go on. What are you going to watch? What are you going to see? What are you going to do? It's pretty intense for most anybody, and most all of us have bowed to pressure. Let's hear verses 6 and 7.
And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. Therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up.
All right, to be cast in a fiery furnace is kind of a big deal. And knowing Nebuchadnezzar, and everybody did, they probably knew he was pretty serious about it. We don't want to lose the point here that this is likely very prophetic. You know, a lot of times the Bible will, especially Daniel and others, that where it tells about an event, and yet it's prophetic about the future, and that's called the already, but not yet. And so the already is then they're having to deal with this image and the fiery furnace challenge, and yet we have the not yet, and we can see the not yet, and you can relate those in Revelation 13:7. And it's talking about the beast and things that are going to happen. It says also it, the beast, was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. So now likely this is opinion here, likely this takes place after the rapture, and then the saints that it's talking about at that time are tribulation saints, which, by the way, would be a very, very difficult time to become a believer, for sure. Now, according to commentary, we have to ask ourselves, who's the beast? Everybody wonders, well, who's the beast? Well, according to the commentary, the beast can refer to a kingdom, which is an unholy union between spiritual evil and political parties. Let's hear verses 8 through 11.
Therefore at that time certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree, that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image, and whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace.
Well, some translations will say astrologers, others Chaldeans. Either way, it's written in Aramaic. And these fellows were obviously jealous of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they were not bowing down. So this was their opportunity to get rid of those guys and get them out of the way. You know, I looked up, it keeps mentioning and repeating the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and other kinds of music. Trying to look for something significant that would tell us anything else about the scripture. See if it's telling us something about us, because a lot of times patterns will emerge like that. I got skunked. I got nothing. If you find something, hear something, I would appreciate a comment very much. Let's hear verse 12.
There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up.
Well, this wasn't viewed as simply worship. This was viewed as treason. You don't bow down, you are directly against me. You are my enemy. And that's the way Nebuchadnezzar was going to look at it. Let's hear verses 13 to 15.
Then Nebuchadnezzar in furious rage commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?
Well, we see starting in 15, he's in a rage that somebody did not bow down. And then he seems to see and recognize who these guys are. And he got pretty congenial. Say, hey guys, you just bow down and we're good. We're going to forget this thing. Let's get past this. He gets refused, and then he gets really angry again, and then reveals that he thinks of himself as a god. Look what he says at the end when he says, and who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? He really thinks of himself as God. And so this is very revealing in what Nebuchadnezzar says. Let's hear 16 and 17.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up.
Look at the wisdom that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shared. They did not say the words, our God's going to take care of us, he's going to save us. They said, he's able. He can do this, but if he doesn't, that's fine. He's in control. And you are not, Mr. Nebuchadnezzar. You are not in control. So from this, we can kind of get 4 precepts. First of all, we should have faith in God's ability and not necessarily in what we want from God. Secondly, God does not work in accordance with our wish, but in accordance with his will. Number 3, the results do not and will not define our relationship with God. Number 4, God does not always prevent us from going through the fire, but he will always be glorified in it by A, our growth, B, others witnessing our deliverance, or C, others witnessing our faith. Let's hear verses 19 to 23.
Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace.
So now we've seen that Nebuchadnezzar has gone from a rage to being conciliatory to being furious and out of control, overheating the fiery furnace, even to the detriment of his own people. But that's a picture of how scary the world can be, providing the fiery furnace of whatever situation you may be going through. And fire sends us a signal in our mind that of something that consumes and leaves little to nothing. Seems all powerful sometimes and scary. And yet, the Lord allowed this picture to come through to us now to show that he can overcome anything, even fire that consumes and destroys. God can and will overcome if it honors him. Let's hear verse 24 and 25.
Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? They answered and said to the king, True, O king. He answered and said, But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods.
Well, this is pretty neat, where Jesus himself walks around in the fire with the guys. And that must have been quite the event, obviously. But they call this, the theologians call this a Christophany, a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus himself. Let's see verse 26.
Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, and come here. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire.
Well, obviously, Nebuchadnezzar has finally seen the truth for at least the 2nd time. Let's hear verse 27.
And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them.
Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have been saved, and there's not even smell on their bodies. And this was witnessed by all of the leadership that Nebuchadnezzar had called into play. Let's hear verses 28 through 30.
Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted in him, and set aside the king's command, and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins. For there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon.
Well, Nebuchadnezzar is now someone who is at least impressed by God. Whether or not he was an actual believer, we don't know. I hope so. Like new believers, sometimes they go off in some wrong directions. And he makes a decree about his proselytizing method, and it might not be the best proselytizing method. I can think of other religions that do that, and that's really just not a good thing. Well, that wraps up chapter 3. I trust you'll be able to come back and visit for chapter 4, and thank you so much for watching.